Okay, this is the PlayPosit for Cask of the Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. I'm not going to do too much background on Edgar Allan Poe, but most people know him as the guy who writes horror short stories. Um, I think it's worthwhile to know that he had a very sad uh, and difficult life. His mom died when he was very young. Um, he also had some very traumatic things happen that probably informed why his stories are so scary. His mom was a an actress. She played Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. And spoiler, she stabs herself with a knife, and they didn't have daycare back then. So her son, Edgar, would watch his mom kill herself, and then after the play was over, watch them take out the prosthetic knife. He had weird ideas about life and death. A lot of times characters in the story die halfway through and they come back as ghosts, and so it kind of makes sense. There were multiple other women in his life, including his wife that he loved, that died mostly of tuberculosis, which was a terrible way to die back then. He was an alcoholic, he had drug addiction problems, and he never made a penny on his work. And finally, when he was about to become, the editor of a very prestigious poetry magazine, um, he was on his way to like a better life on a train, and they stopped. I want to say Baltimore. Um, and they were having an election, and some con men convinced him to have alcohol, which he hadn't done in a while, and they gave him so much alcohol that he died of alcohol poisoning several days later in a hospital. Like, it just is a completely tragic, terrifying life, and it's even worse than that. There's stuff I'm leaving out, but in any case, so it's easy to say like, oh, that guy's weird, he's creepy. There's a reason for these things, right? But I do want to, as we read, talk about how he's able to make such creepy short stories. How is he able to get the mood so like intense and just, it's not scary for modern audiences usually, but it's just creepy. It's like, oh, what's this guy doing? So that's what I'm going to try to get across as we go. Background, and I'm reading from, on Canvas. If you click on Cask of the Amontillado PDF, um, that's where you will find this story. So the background says, centuries ago, Christians in Italy buried their dead in catacombs, which are long, winding underground tunnels. Later, wealthy families built private catacombs beneath their homes. Dark and cool, these chambers were suitable not only for burial, but also for the storage of fine wines, such as Amontillado. So Amontillado is a type of very rare wine, very expensive. Poe's story is set during Carnival, which is celebrated before the start of Lent, the season during which Christians give up various pleasures. During a carnival, many people wear costumes and dance in the streets. Um, it's a little bit strange to store your wine where there's like dead bodies everywhere, but this wine is kind of, without giving too much away, leading to the death of this person. So it kind of fits, right? Metaphorically, like they have to have the two things together. All right, let us begin. And this one's kind of a confusing one, I think, if you read on your own. It takes some explanation, especially the first part. So that's why some of these I like to read in PlayPosit, the ones that are a little more difficult. The ones that are easier, you can read on your own and just answer questions. So like the sniper and actually, did we do sniper and PlayPosit? I can't remember. And but certainly the most dangerous game is pretty straightforward. But okay, here we go. The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. As like the last PlayPosit, I'm not going to stop and ask questions. I'm going to let the PlayPosit do that for me. I'm just going to explain the plot and add the questions later. Now, you'll notice right away, though, we have an I. So the narrator is talking directly to us. Now, Fortunato is the name of a person. It's kind of a strange name. There's no coincidence that the word fortune is part of Fortunato. um, and we start to, in this exposition, we start to understand the narrator right away. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insults, like injuries, I don't know, physical injuries are fine, but when he insults me, that's it. I'm vowing revenge, okay, which is kind of the main topic of the story. He's talking to us directly, which is a little disconcerting. Like, what, me? Who? What? How do I know you? You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. Not only are we supposedly friends with him, but we're like good friends. We know the nature of his soul. You know what kind of person I am. So you know that I would never utter a threat to him after I vowed revenge. This is already freaking me out, right? Like, what did you do to him? At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved, precluded the idea of risk. It makes it the fact that I have absolutely decided to get revenge on this person makes it impossible for me to take any risks. Like, if I really want to make sure I get true revenge, I can't take any risks of getting caught. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. I must punish without getting caught. That's otherwise it's like, well, that wasn't worth it. Now I'm in prison. Like, what was the point? Now everybody thinks they're going to do things without getting caught. The question is, does this guy actually get away with it? Because most don't, right? A wrong is unredressed when when retribution overtakes its redresser. That's a strange sentence. It's difficult to understand. What he's saying is, if you get caught and get punished, then it's not really revenge because you're getting punished for it. You're not actually like achieving what you want to achieve. You're not really, getting revenge. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. Again, like, Edgar Allan Poe, why you got to make this so hard to understand? What he's saying is, so revenge doesn't work unless you get away with it. Also, revenge doesn't work unless the person you're getting revenge on knows that you're getting revenge. It's not good enough to go up behind him and shoot him in the back of the head because he doesn't know that you're getting revenge. Um, what's he gonna do? Torture him? Like, how much does he need to know? Is it good enough to have him turn around, hey, remember me, and then shoot him? Or is it like, oh no, I want this guy to suffer? Now he doesn't go so far as to say that, but it just this makes me wonder, like, how far is he going to take this? I mean, it's Edgar Allan Poe. How far do you think he's going to take it? It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation or his death, right? His destruction. So the fact that this guy can smile to this guy's face, like, hey, how are you? It's so good to see you. And before, that smile meant, hey, I'm really glad to see you. Now it means, hey, I'm going to kill you. I'm so glad to see you so I can murder you. And the fact that he can smile about that, we're really starting to understand the character already. Like, he's a total psychopath, right? Like, anyone who could just like sociopath, like, has no emotions, like, he doesn't show anything, is there, everything's great, I'm gonna kill you, like that. But this is what Edgar Allan Poe does. He creates these characters that we really get inside their head psychologically, right? It's not just enough to be like, okay, this guy's gonna kill someone. Think about the way he's acting now, this like, hi. Right? It's creepy. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, and the fact that the narrator is personally telling us this story makes it even creepier, right? The fact that we are friends with a psychopath, I mean, that's the assumption we're making. He says, you know the nature of my soul, and yet we're talking to this guy who's a psychopath, who's going to murder someone and enjoy it and tell us how much he's enjoying it. It's really creepy if we imagine that happening. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Of course, the narrator's going to exploit his weak point because he's very sneaky, right? Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Um, Connoisseurship means he's really good at tasting wine, and you're like, well, what does that mean? He's a drunk? Maybe, but so I don't know if you've ever met. There's people that really get into wine, right? They have these giant glasses, and I mean giant glasses, and they swirl them around, and they kind of sit there with their nose turned up, and they sip their wine, you know, and and they talk about like, oh, now I'll just be honest, I've done this before. Okay, I've acted snobby and wine, not whining, but I it's kind of fun to pretend that you're fancy. But there's people who like this is serious business. Like we're talking people who either make wine or people who really pride themselves. Like there's certain people, not making this up, who can drink some wine and tell you like, okay, it has these types of grapes in it. Like there's a test you can pass, and it's basically you're drinking wine and saying like what kind of grapes. Like they can tell what region of Italy, like what part of the country, based on the different flavors. Like the palate, their tongue is so refined that they can taste like tiny little hints of little things that you would never taste unless someone said, "Oh, do you taste a little bit of strawberry or a hint of chicory or a little bit of smokiness?" You're like, "Oh yeah, I didn't notice that." People are insane, but so essentially, Fortunato actually knows his stuff. He knows his wine, right? Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture among British and Austrian millionaires, right? They want to act fancy so they can take a lot of money from these tourists, okay? In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. Like, he doesn't know anything truly about like art and um, what's the other one? Gemmery. Like he can't look at gems and be like, oh, this is 14 karat gold or whatever. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. Like he knows his stuff. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in Italian vintages myself and bought largely whenever I could. Okay, so they both are into wine. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking. So he's particularly like, hey, friendly. Particularly friendly. The man wore motley. I'm going to refer down to a multicolored costume worn by a clown or jester. Okay, this guy's a party animal, right? Like, what in the world is he wearing? He had on a tight-fitting party striped dress. Let that sink in for a second. And his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. Now, just for the record, I'm not trying to make drinking alcohol sound, exciting or fun. I'm just describing what he's doing in the story. Okay, let's be clear about that, especially with your parents watching behind your backs. Okay, I would also say that in classroom, even if your parents weren't there, for the record. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. So again, this like, here he is smiling, I'm gonna kill you, and he's shaking his hand, and he's like, I'm so glad that we're here at this moment right now. So good to see you. Thank you for being here. This guy's a little crazy. I said to him, my dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. And just knowing what is about to happen to this guy it makes this whole scene very creepy, right? And I keep saying that, but hopefully you're feeling it. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, a barrel, giant amount of alcohol. And I have my doubts. How? He said Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible. And in the middle of carnival? I have my doubts, I replied. And I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. Amontillado, I have my doubts. Amontillado, I must satisfy them. Oh, Amontillado. They're Italian, right? As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. That's another person's name. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. Okay. Sherry is a dessert wine. No one in the universe who knows anything about wines, and I mean anything, would mistake Amontillado for sherry. Sherry doesn't taste like wine. It's sweet. It tastes like sugar. Okay. Again, not trying to endorse drinking alcohol. It tastes terrible. Don't drink it. Um, but this is what he's saying here is he's saying no. Lucchesi doesn't know anything. Now, let's put two and two together. Obviously, he hasn't talked to Lucchesi. Okay. He's trying to lure the guy somewhere. He's trying to get him to go with him, right? Because he's like, oh, don't worry, I'm gonna go talk to this other guy. No, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You got to talk to me. I'll do it. Take me. Tell me where we're going. Like, let's do it. I'm. You're not going to that guy. Okay, that's his plan. Okay. Oh, that's a dark picture. And yet, some fools would have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go. Well, whither? Where are we going? To your vaults. Oh, my friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive that you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come. No, my friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with niter. Let us go nonetheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Okay, let's pause. So by now you have hopefully filled in the vocabulary definitions for dramatic irony and verbal irony, and you already know situational irony. So we've already seen some situational irony here, right? We've seen some things that are opposite of what they should be, situations. So for example, you wouldn't expect someone who's acting so warm and friendly and smiling and all this to have the thought of murdering someone, right? You also, he talks about that, no, I'm very concerned about your health. I'm concerned about the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are damp and they are encrusted with niter. Niter, it says salt deposits, but basically they have mold in them that can get into your lungs, especially if you have a cold, and give you pneumonia and kill you. Okay, so he's acting concerned. This is verbal irony because what he's saying is the opposite of what he intends. He says that he cares about his health, but really the opposite is true. Okay, and the entire thing is also dramatic irony because we know something that Fortunato does not. We know that Montressor means to kill him, to kill Fortunato. Fortunato is not aware of that. So what this does is it creates suspense. It creates tension. It makes us say, no, don't go down there with him. He's crazy, psycho. And so if we didn't know that, we wouldn't be saying that, right? So this is a very powerful tool that Edgar Allan Poe is using. And again, it makes it even more creepy because, it makes us nervous and anxious. Like, no, what's going to happen? Okay. And also the tricky way that he's luring him to his house. He didn't even have to ask him. He just says, I'm gonna go ask this other guy about wine. No, take me to your vaults. And by the way, a vault is an underground passageway, like underground. No one can hear you scream underground. Okay. Take me down to where you keep your wine under your house in a small dark passage where no one will ever find me. if you murder me. Like, ay, ay, ay. All right. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. He grabs onto it. Remember, he's intoxicated. This is why you don't drink. A lot of times you can be persuaded to do things you don't want to do. You can be tricked into things, right? Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a recoliere. Never pronounce that. It's a cloak. Okay. Uh, Closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo, to his place. Now, putting on a mask, okay, covers his face. He has a cloak, right, and a mask. No one. He's hiding himself so nobody can see him. He doesn't want any witnesses that can say, "I saw Montresor taking Fortunato somewhere." So he completely covers himself, hides himself. Also, he's doing this during Carnival, where most everybody's drunk. They're not going to remember anything anywhere. And most people, when they're drunk and partying at the Carnival, are not worried about people they see around. They're not even noticing people around them. They're just focused on partying and having a good time. This is on purpose. Okay. So they go to his house. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. He knows that as soon as he tells his servants, "Hey, you're not allowed to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. I know there's a big party going on outside, but you're not allowed to go out. And I'll be back tomorrow morning." He knows, or like in a couple days or whatever it was. He knows they're going to take off. But notice how everything is so tricky. He doesn't do anything directly. He's so sneaky about everything. Indirect characterization, right? I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and we have 2 vocabulary words here. Sconces are wall fixtures that hold the flambeaux, which are candlesticks of flaming pieces of wood. So they don't have flashlights, right? This is what they use to go down into it's pitch black down there in the catacombs. Giving one to Fortunato, I bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase. It's kind of creepy, a little gothic, right? Requesting him to be cautious as he followed. Again, anytime he says, be careful, I care about you, makes it look like he cares about the guy. That's irony, verbal irony. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood there together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady. That's the way he's handling himself. He's drunk, so he's waving back and forth. And the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," said he. "It is further on." Said I, "but observe the white web work." I just lost my place. "Which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked at length. "Nitre," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" And this part here, this ugh, 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 that's him coughing. So literally, like he says, "How long have you had that cough?" He's like, My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. Now I want you to think about the last time that you had a cough that was so bad that literally you were coughing for minutes at a time and could not stop coughing. Like he already has a really bad cough. This is all planned out. Montresor knows that his health is already deteriorating in his lungs. My poor friend. Oh, and also, sorry, I missed a piece of foreshadowing. Anytime someone says, "He had a weakness," this Fortunato, and then he goes on to describe how he's a connoisseur of wine. How is that a weakness? And how is Montresor going to use the fact that Fortunato is a connoisseur of wine in order to kill him? It's a good question. Um, but okay, I'm sure the PlayPosit has already asked that question. We'll find out. My poor friend had it impossible to reply for many minutes. It is nothing, he said at last. Really? Come, I said with decision. We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there's the Chesney. Enough! The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. True, true, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Okay, a couple things here. So for one, obviously we have more verbal items. Your health is precious. We should go back. He's making it seem like he cares about the guy. Okay. When obviously he doesn't. It's the opposite. But number two, we don't get a lot of information about what in the world Fortunato did to make Montresor want to kill him. But here's a hint. It's very small. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is nothing. He's jealous of the guy. Fortunato possibly did something that made Montresor not as rich and powerful. People admire you. People love you. You are respected. For me, not at all. Nothing. They won't miss me. They don't care about me. But you are a man to be missed, right? So there's something about that is a hint. It doesn't tell us much, but it's something. The other thing is, you will be ill. I cannot be responsible. Besides, there's the Chessie. So it seems very genuine until the very end. He goes, "Oh, and by the way, I'm going to go get the Chessie." No! And if he actually just said we should go back, he might say, "Yeah, okay." But as soon as he says, "Hey, it's Lucchesi," I'll go get him. He'll tell me about this wine. That forces the guy to say, "No," or doesn't force him. I shouldn't use that language. He is tricking the guy into saying, "No, no, no." Especially the guy's drunk. No, you can't trust him. I know more than that guy. So he's using Fortunato's like vanity, this fact that he thinks he's so great, his arrogance, not vanity, arrogance, to trick him into going further. Okay. And then the final thing I want to mention is that he's like, you got to be careful out here. It's tough. Like there's some creepy people out here. He doesn't say that, but you get where I'm going with it. It's like, yeah, you're creepy. But he says, here, this will help. Drink some more alcohol. Okay, he's obviously getting him drunker to be able to take advantage of him. Okay, so it's not the main theme, but certainly there's a theme here that is like, don't drink in situations like this. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. The wine is literally sitting in the mold that is getting into the guy's lungs, right, when he's sick. He raised it to his lips with a leer. That's kind of a sneer, and he paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. Remember, he's got bells on his cap, so as he moves around, his bells jingle. And he does a little toast. He says, this is Fortunato. He says, I drink to the berry that repose around us. This is very typical. I drink to the dead, right? And they're surrounded by like skeletons, which is quite creepy. It is like long, dark corridors, which is lined with like bones and skeletons and cobwebs. No one else is around. They're underground, and you're with a psycho killer. Like, I don't know what is more creepy than that. And we know he's a psycho killer. We know what's going to happen to him. And the whole time we're going, ah. And then he says something even creepier. The guy says, I drink to the dead around us. And Montresor says, and I to your long life. I drink to your long life. Okay, now, this is particularly creepy. One, it's verbal irony because we know that, well, it's also dramatic irony, but it's verbal irony because what he's saying is I'm drinking or toasting to your long life, but actually I'm going to make your life very short. It's also dramatic irony because we know that he doesn't mean that. But what's particularly creepy about this is he's cracking a joke here, right? Like that's a pretty funny joke. I mean, for a psychopath. Yeah. I drink to your long life when we know he's about to kill him. Like it's like, oh, that's dark humor. But what's particularly creepy is there is no one around to get that humor. So why crack a joke like that? Well, he's entertaining himself. Well, there's a couple things. He might be entertaining himself. He might think it's funny, right? He might say, and it'd be like, you know, uh, or he might be lying about this, about what he said, and he might be just adding in jokes to the story to make it entertaining for the people who are listening to it, which is us. And so listening to it should make us even more nervous and more anxious. We're sitting here with a psychopath that's telling us these things, he's cracking jokes, he's enjoying this journey of death that he's taking this guy on. And he's just, every chance he gets, he's messing with the guy. Oh yeah, you're gonna live forever. Like that's creepy. Okay. But it's very subtle. It's not like boo, jump scare horror. It's just like, oh man, this guy creeps me out. Okay, so let's continue. And I drink to your long life. He again took my arm and we proceeded. These vaults, he said, are extensive. The Montressors, I replied, were a great and numerous family. So again, a little bit of a clue. Are they not great or are they not numerous because of something that Fortunato did? I don't know. But that's an interesting wording there. Fortunato says to Montressor, I forget your arms. No, he didn't forget his arms. Okay, his arms are right there. His coat of arms. Every family would have a coat of arms, which is like a shield and it has a certain symbol or pattern on it that would signify that you belong to this family. If you went into battle, you would wear it on your armor or something to that effect. He says, oh, I'll tell you what the picture, what my emblem looks like on my coat of arms. It's a huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel. Now, I want you to visualize that for a second. You have a giant foot, and it's crushing a serpent, a snake. And the snake's fangs are embedded in the heel of the giant foot. There is no question this is symbolism, that either the foot or the snake represents either Fortunato or Montressor. So Husu. Well, I think if you think about it, it should be pretty obvious. Fortunato is the more powerful one, right? He's the Bigfoot that's trying to stomp on things. He's the reason why Montressor's family used to be numerous and used to be powerful, and that's why he is also powerful uh, and cared for and respected, but Montressor isn't. Um, and he's trying to just crush his enemy. And yet, Montressor is a serpent. He's sneaky. He's wily. He moves around and slithers. And ultimately, which one will die? Uh, we know that, at least from what Montressor has told us, that Fortunato has injured him, so he's stepping on him. But when you inject poison into a foot, that person will die. And does you know if you saw that, that was my wife texting me. I will ignore that. Uh, but yes, we want more magic tracks because they're super cool. They're like little tracks that the toy cars go around and stuff. Um, and is this foreshadowing of how he's going to kill the guy? Maybe. So every coat of arms also has a motto, right? It has a saying that goes along with it. So what's your motto? Nemo impune licessit, which is Latin for no one injures me without. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting that. Nobody attacks me without punishment. Sorry, I was trying to memorize it, but I couldn't remember. Okay, so is this really the guy's coat of arms? You're telling me that the coat of arms, the picture, is exactly the situation that's going on right now, and you're telling me literally his motto is "No one attacks me without punishment." The guy's messing with him. He's almost trying to give away that he's trying to kill him, but in such a way that there's no way the guy would ever be able to tell. Also, he's telling us the story. So is it possible that he's saying these things, completely making them up, but he's throwing them in there because this is funny and this is a laugh? Or did he actually do these things and he's just chuckling to himself because this is so funny? And now that he's gotten away with the murder, which no spoilers there. Okay, there were spoilers there. Is he, he can't help himself but share this with somebody because he's so starved for attention and he just has to tell somebody. Um, and and he's just showing us how much he's enjoying this whole thing. Like, yeah, did you hear what I said? Told the guy, I told him basically that I was gonna kill him. Oh, and he didn't even notice. Like, this guy's a psycho. All right. So, and the guy has no clue, right? He says, "Oh, good, yeah, okay, that sounds great." The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the balls jingled. My own, that's his eyeballs. Sorry, his his hat, the balls in the end of his hat. My own fancy grew warm with the medoc. So he's also drinking wine and getting a little bit warm. We had passed through walls of piled bones with casks and puncheons intermingling as bottles of wine into the innermost recesses of the catacombs. And the deeper and deeper they go, the less chance Fortunato has of escaping. The deeper they're going into like the darkness, right? Into the unknown, into the unknown. So, all right. I paused again, and this time made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. Right, grabs him. The niter, right? Uh, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We're below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late, which means before it is too late. Your cough, it is nothing. Let us go on, but first another draught of the Medoc. I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave, which, by the way, that looks like grave. I think it's pronounced de Grave, but he's grabbing a bottle of wine. That's the type of wine is called grave. Edgar Allan Poe is doing this on purpose. He emptied it at a breath. Okay, the guy just drank an entire bottle of wine. Unless you were a super heavyweight, you were going to be flat in your face pretty soon. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. He's doing some kind of sign, some kind of weird thing with the bottle. And I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. Do you not comprehend? Like, do you not know the sign that I'm making with the bottle? Not I. Then you are not of the Brotherhood. Well, how? You are not of the Masons. Oh, okay. The Freemasons were a secret society, like the Illuminati, and they had secret handshakes and secret, like the people had to let others know, um, that hey, I'm part of the Freemasons. Oh, are you? And so they had these secret handshakes. And he says, yes, 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 yes. I said, yes, yes, yes. I'm a Mason. You impossible. A Mason? A Mason. I replied. A sign. That could be another clue because Masons, you had to be wealthy and connected, and he's like, no, it's impossible. You couldn't possibly be a Mason. Kind of ripping on the guy. Uh, he says, okay, yeah, no, I have a sign. It is this. And he pulls something out from beneath the folds of his cape. And it's a trowel. And a trowel is a small little shovel. And you use it kind of flat and it goes up to the handle. And you use it to lay down cement like mortar when you're laying bricks down. Okay, you put the bricks down, then you put the mortar on, and you use this trowel to like smooth it out. Which is funny because the guy says, you're not a Mason, meaning a Freemason, like from the Freemason Society. He goes, no, I'm a Mason. Look, I have a trowel, so I'm a Mason. I lay bricks. That's what Masons do. Why does this guy have a trowel just hanging out? Like, do you carry around trowels? Okay, this is foreshadowing. So, like, but we don't know exactly how he's going to use it. It's just creepy that this guy all of a sudden just pulls out this. It's not exactly a weapon. It's not super sharp or anything, but like, why is this guy carrying around? And you're telling me that you're carrying that around just in case there's a joke that you could say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Mason. Look, I have a trowel." Ah, you jest, he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. Okay, he's really drunk at this point. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, descending again, like they're really getting deep into the catacombs here. Arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. The flambeau, of course, is the torch. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. They're at the end of the trail, okay? The deepest, darkest like pit they can find. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. Well, they're not in the catacombs. This is a private vault, but I keep saying it's catacombs. It's not. Three sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the fourth, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one end a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by displacing of the bones, we perceived still an interior recess in depth of about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special use within itself, but formed merely the interval between the two colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination, the feeble light, did not enable us to see. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for the Chessy, here's an ignoramus, interrupted my friend as he stepped unsteadily forward while I followed immediately at his heels. Okay, there's a couple things. First of all, let's talk about this room that they have arrived in. So we've already talked about how creepy like the whole setting is, right? It gets worse, deeper and deeper into the crypts. It gets more and more creepy as they go. The final room they go into has skeletons lining the walls from top to bottom. Like there's skeletons everywhere. So this is like Halloween, right? It is like horror movie stuff. Except for one wall where it seems like the bones have been kind of taken down and they're covering something because they form a pile. There is something that is hidden underneath those bones. Now, Fortunato doesn't notice that because he's inebriated, but the narrator, very quickly and subtly informs us of that. The other thing is, he says, on the wall where the bones have been torn down, it looks like someone has constructed another little room. Okay. Uh, and let's look at the measurements here. It's not very big. It is in depth 4 feet, right? In depth this way, 4 feet. In width about 3. So, if that's like a foot, 3 of those, right? Go back here so you can see, maybe something like that. And in height, 6 or 7. Uh, what can fit in there? Like, what is that the perfect size for? Yeah, a body. Okay, if you haven't figured it out. And it says it's been constructed for no special use, like somebody just built that. Guess who? Okay. And he tells the guy, well, the giant barrel of wine is in there, in that small little closet. Could a barrel of wine fit in a room that size, 3 feet by 4 feet? It would be a tight squeeze, but I doubt it. It would fill up the whole room. And the guy's like, well, okay, we go in there. And as he tries to go into the room, Montresor is like right on his tail, like he's following him, like right next to him. In an instant, he, meaning uh, Fortunato, had reached the extremity of the niche, right? I mean, he bumped into the wall. There's no room in there. And finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly and bewildered. He's like, wait, what? There's a rock right here. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. On its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from one another by about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, and from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand over the wall, right? You cannot help but feel the niter. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you, right? But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power. The Amontillado, said my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I had spoken before. Okay, so just to clarify, to make sure that you understand what's happening. So Montresor has set this all up ahead of time, right? Obviously, he went down there. He built that little wall, that little room in the wall. He pulled all the skeletons down so he can build that, and he's got something hidden underneath there, which we're about to find out what it is. And he also put in a couple like giant staples into the wall, and then there's a chain with the lock on it. So at about waist level. So the guy goes in there and he takes the chain off the wall, wraps it around Fortunato, and the staples are like driven into the stone, so he can't get them out possibly. And he, puts the padlock on, and then he messes with the guys like, "Hey, you want to go back? No, you sure? Okay." So then we find out what's under the bones. Throwing them aside, throwing the bones aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I begin vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. Okay, so now we understand what's going on here. Now let's think about this. The guy lugged down all of these bricks. I mean, can you imagine how long it took him to he must have wheelbarrows, he's carrying all these bricks like way down in this dirt path down, half a mile or a mile. And he probably had buckets load of those or wheelbarrow loads of them. And he just piled up a bunch of bricks, and then he covered the stone covered them with the bones. And then he built this whole extra wall. Like, it's not easy to just build a little extra room. And all so he could wall this guy in. He's now trapped the guy in there. He's locked in. There's niter on the walls. So the guy's going to be breathing this mold. And he's going to slowly build up a wall until he walls him in. And the guy's going to suffocate with no air, and his lungs are damaged anyway. But I do want to stop for a second and just tell you, can't have discussions in this format. Think about how terrifying that is. On the one hand, how awful it would be to be buried alive, right? You wake up and all of a sudden you're trapped and you're right. This guy, I think it's even worse because he's going to become not intoxicated in a few minutes. He's going to realize what the heck's going on, and he's going to see the light just slowly disappear. He's slowly, I mean, this thing takes hours for the cement to dry. He's slowly getting, so it's one thing to, wake up and you're already trapped in there and you're going to panic, and that's awful, right? But to just watch this guy or watch the light just disappear to nothing, like he's going to be alive for hours thinking about this slow, torturous, painful death where he inhales, this mold that's going to kill him. That is a brutal way to kill somebody. And it's, people nowadays, like with horror movies, like they want to do all these gross, like ripping people's bodies apart and stuff. Yeah, this to me is much more terrifying, like psychological, right? You just like what's going through your mind, and you have all this time to think about it, and just creepy. Okay. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication of this that I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I lay the second and third and the fourth, and then I heard furious vibrations of the chain. So this has been a while now. Like the guy's right, he's starting to wake up, but he's laying down, layer after layer after layer, and all of a sudden, now the guy's like furiously trying to get out of the chains because now he realizes what's going on. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which time I might hearken to it with more satisfaction. I ceased my labors and sat down among the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, sixth, and seventh tier. So here he is working hard, at building things, and he hears the guy like struggling, and he's like, "Oh, this would be entertaining." And he sits back on the bones, which are creepy, and he just watches him for a couple minutes as he's struggling. He's like, and as soon as the guy's done, he's like, "Okay, you done? All right, I'll go back to work. That's good. That was fun. Thanks. I appreciate that." Like, dude, what is wrong with this guy? Okay. Uh, I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams burst suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a moment I hesitated, I trembled, unsheathing my rapier. So he does have a sword with him, that he, quickly pulls out because he's worried the guy, like, he goes up to the guy, shines the light in his face, and he's like, "Ah!" Kind of thing. And he's like, "Whoa!" And he takes the sword out. I began to grope about it with a recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. He's like checking the wall, and he's like, "No, this guy's not going anywhere. We're good. He can scream all he wants." I reapproached the wall. So he goes back up to the guy who's screaming. He's like, "Rah!" Right? He's like trying to get the chains off. Scream. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. Now, I want you to understand what that means. So the guy, Fortunato, is screaming, "Ah, rah, rah." Montresor goes up to, the wall that he's constructed, and he starts screaming at Fortunato. And he says, "I aided him in his screams, and I surpassed him." He screams louder than him. Rah, rah, rah. He's yelling at the guy, right? Just at the top of his lungs. Ah! Until the guy like is yelling, and he's like, like, dude, this guy's crazy. Not Montresor. Fortunato is so freaked out by Montresor screaming louder than him that he just stops and he's like, okay. uh, It was now midnight because, of course, it is. What is more creepy than midnight? Like, what other time would it be when we're going to do the final, bit of death here? Okay. And my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the eighth, ninth, and 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. Now there remained one single stone. He's completely walled everything in except for one stone that he's going to fit in there. There's one bit of light coming through that Fortunato can still see. I struggled with its weight, right? He's lifting up the last stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came from out the niche a low laugh, right? Fortunato's laughing. Ha 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 ha. Ah, ah, right? It erected the hairs on my head, like it creeped me out, right? It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, ha, ha, ha. It's a very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. Like, it's funny. This whole thing that you tied me up, that's hilarious. we we will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo over our wine. Ah. And Montresor's kind of joining in. And he says, Amontillado! Ah, yeah, yes. Amontillado, yes. Amontillado, but is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest. Let us be gone. It's funny. It's funny. It's good. Good joke. But all right, that's good. Let's go. Let's go home, right? Let us be gone. Yes, I said. Let us be gone. Okay, so you know what he means by that, right? He's like, yes, you will be gone soon. You will be dead, right? For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said. For the love of God. Like, that is so creepy. Like, the guy just, like, he's messing with him and he's enjoying it. Um, and he just, he's like, for the love of God, like, please don't do this. Like, begging him. And he's like, yes, for the love of God. Mm-hmm. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. He's like, Fortunato, Fortunato. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato. No, no answer. I called again, Fortunato. No answer still. I thrust the torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. He's not trying to burn the guy, but he just lets the torch fall to his feet so that he can like see what's inside. There came forth in return only a jingling of bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I really like the way this last part is um, written. My heart grew sick, dash, dash, on account of the dampness of the catacombs. The dash, dash is a pause, right? This part right here. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. It's almost as if he's saying he actually felt a little remorse. Like, my heart aches because I knew he was dead at that moment. But then, and he pauses, but then he has to kind of, oh, on account of the catacombs. That's why my heart is sick. Yeah, it's the dampness. It's damp. So my heart was feeling a little, not so well, but now it's fine. So, yeah. So it's almost just for half a second, we get a tiny bit of remorse, but it only lasts for half a second. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up against the new masonry. I erected the old rampart of bones. So not only does he put the stone in, he puts all the bones back up. I mean, that must take forever. I think about it, you have these full skeletons that you have to lift one on top of the other until it goes to the ceiling to make sure that, it looks exactly like no one will ever even look to find that guy trapped in there, right? Uh, for the half a century, no mortal has disturbed them in pace requiat, which means, in may you rest in peace. Um, so the guy got away with it, and now he's telling us this story. And like I said, I think the whole thing is just a psychological thriller where it just gets under your skin. That's what Edgar Allan Poe does to me. Like, yeah, he's got a couple stories where it's like a guy comes out with an axe and buries it into someone's skull. That's, if you want to read that, it's called The Black Cat. Okay, but usually they're more like just slow, creepy. What's going on? What's happening? And then you find out, and you're like, oh, and it's not gross except for the axe going into the person's skull. You might have the heartbeat, to-do, 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 and the telltale heart that's constantly beating, and it's just freaking you out. Where's that heartbeat coming from? It's that creepiness. That's what Edgar Allan Poe does, and he uses the setting to create that. He lets us. He creates really creepy characters. This guy is just what he says and does, and how he's smiling and everything's great. Oh, it gets under my skin. I really like this story, but I think if I were to read this, as a high school student, I might read it and go, I don't get it. But I think when you have someone read and explain it, maybe hopefully it was helpful. So I know this was a long one. I hope you got through it okay. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.